Hey guys, Nolan Staff, kettlebell trainer and connoisseur. Today I want to show you 3 tips to master your kettlebell swing. Alright guys, so tip number 1, and I believe this to be the most important tip that I could give you in regards to kettlebell training and in general overall when it comes to your fitness training across the whole board, really. And this has to do with injury prevention, particularly in the hands. So when you start your kettlebell training, if you're just starting, you're going to want to, more than likely, this is what I did anyways, grip it right in the palm of your hands like you would a dumbbell or barbell, anything like that. You know what I mean? Because you have the most security, control over the thing, right? However, when you do this, it's really going to tear apart your hands. Grip the kettlebell in the finger area, right? When it comes to swings in particular. That way there's less friction. There's less friction in the middle of your hands, and it allows for the kettlebell handle to slide more freely within that kind of hook grip within your fingers right there. And of course it's still going to create some calluses, here and up on your fingers more, but it's not going to completely just tear your hands apart, right? So you want to grip the kettlebell here, like in your fingers, right? In your fingers. So when you go to swing, it moves a little bit more freely rather than death gripping it. It's going to tear your hands apart. But there's a saying in sports, your greatest asset is your availability. If you're not on the field, then, you're not doing anything for your team, right? You're just sitting there. So that kind of goes the same way with this tip. Your greatest asset is the availability of your hands in this case. Like, you can't train. You have to literally put a pause on your training if your hands are all torn up. Tip number 2 to master your kettlebell swing is a proper hip hinge motion. Now there's a few different, variations of a kettlebell swing, but the most popular and kind of standard way of doing it is a hip hinge called hard style movement, where you're hinging at the hips rather than doing, like, let's say, more of a squat. And I'll show you what that looks like and the differences and how you can work on a proper hip hinge movement. So a proper hip hinge movement will look like this. We are bending at the hips like this. The glutes are going back, the back is neutral, and the legs are keeping relatively straight. Not like, perfectly straight, but a little bit. Straight, but not straight. Hips hinging back. A squat will look like this. That's a squat. This is a hip hinge. If you're having trouble getting that movement down, or you don't quite know what it feels like, then you're going to want to start at a foundational level and build yourself up. But I mean, you can get it relatively quickly, and there's a couple good cues that you can try to remember to really understand, get it. First thing I would recommend is a sumo deadlift. You're going to want to get your feet a little wider than shoulder width, bell more or less directly under you. Now pretend like you're sitting back in a chair, right? Pretend like you have a chair behind you and you're sitting in the chair, right? It's going to kind of be like a half squat, half hip hinge deadlift type of movement. Sumo deadlift. Kind of like you're sitting in your chair. You're going to grab the bell, straight up. Sit back in your chair, up. Back in your chair, up. Back in your chair, up. Second variation is your traditional deadlift variation. So feet about hip width. You're gonna do the same thing like you're sitting in a chair, right? You're sitting back in the chair. Sit back in your chair. Grab it. We're not squatting. We're sitting back. Hip hinging. Spine neutral. And finally, your full kettlebell swing. Feet position about shoulder width, toes slightly pointed outwards. Now, it's going to be the same thing as the deadlift that you just did, only your feet are a little wider and you're hiking the bell through your legs. A couple cues you can remember to maybe help you out with this. One, I already mentioned it, is the sitting back into a chair sort of thing. Not squatting straight down, but sitting back into a chair. That's one you can use if that helps you, especially in the sumo deadlift variation to start out with. Another good one is, especially when you're doing the swing, pretend like there's a wall. There's a wall slightly behind you. You want to extend your hips back so that you're going to touch that wall, right? So we're not squatting down, we're trying to touch the wall with the hips. Also with the bell, when it goes back between your legs. When it goes back between your legs, try to get the bell to touch right there. So it gets that full swing back, and then you can drive up with the momentum, right? So what that will kind of look like, I'm thinking, okay, wall behind me, I want to tap it with my glutes, and then tap it with the bell also. So wall behind me, tap, drop, tap, drop, tap, drop, tap, drop. That way, you're not doing a squat, you're doing a hip hinge. You're trying to tap that wall with your glutes and the bell. The third tip and final tip that I have for you guys is one of, I guess, direction of power or momentum or energy. So when you take a look at the kettlebell swing, it looks like, you're more or less swinging in a more horizontal path. Like if I were to let go of the bell, it would go way out in front of me. Like if I were to let go, it would go. Now, to mitigate that, I would recommend thinking vertically displacing power, right? Like almost like jumping or like sending it upwards, right? So when you come back with it, instead of thinking, oh, I'm just swinging, really out here, no, think more like I'm going to swing upwards. Like I'm driving through my feet and through my hips, but I want to send the bell more vertical, skywards, instead of that way, go that way. To help with that, bend the elbows when you swing. So keep the arms bent, think upwards. Now, putting all this together, tip 1, tip 2, tip 3, putting that hand placement here, nice kind of looser grip to protect your hand so you can keep training. Tip 2, the hip hinge movement. So you're tapping that wall behind you, you're sitting in your chair. And tip 3, thinking of sending your energy and the bell vertically. Shoulder width stance, bell in front of us. We're gonna grab it with our fingers here. Grab it with our fingers, hike it back, upwards, tap, up, tap, up, tap, up, tap, up. And at the top of the movement, it should feel floaty. The bell should feel floaty in your fingers. Weightless for a split second here. Weightless, come down. Weightless, come back down. That's how it should feel, and you should be in control of the bell, not letting the bell control you. So those are my 3 main tips for the kettlebell swing, to master the kettlebell swing, and for beginners in particular. Remember, fingers, hip hinge, tap the wall, and think vertically. If you like the video, like it. Consider subscribing if you want to see more kettlebell content and workout content in general. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.